here on the third Thursday of the month at 2000 local time on the 146.955 and 443.65 repeater system. The purpose of this net is to provide on-air training and topics to benefit the amateur radio community. All amateurs are invited to check in and do not need to be a member of our club to participate or follow along. The presentation night will be myself and Nathan, KC3GMF. It will be live streamed on Bob and N3SH's YouTube channel. I will now ask if there are any net or club announcements. Please call KC3BYA. I'll now take check-in. When check-in, state your call phonetically along with your name and location. At this time, please call KC3BYA.
KB3BYA and U3Q. KB3BYA and U3Q with a recheck. Yeah, I just want to remind everybody my live stream is up now. It's NU3Q Amateur Radio. I'll be streaming this net on my YouTube channel for anybody who wants to follow along. And I have the slides already here on my computer. I just need you guys to tell me when to change them.
Let's welcome Jim to the
on the PDF there. So Tony covered the first paragraph there. PTSI, they started 20 years ago, and the second part is interesting there because originally only commercial equipment was available to use DMR, and that still is very popular equipment to use, and you know, a lot of the old school DMR guys, that's what they're using. But a lot of companies that make radio equipment for amateurs, they have radios available now that are DMR capable, including like Linko makes one, and a lot of the Chinese companies make them. That site that Tony mentioned previously, Nick Lore, he has a whole section dedicated to DMR, including this section showing the available amateur radios for it. So that's something to check out if you're interested in getting into DMR and thinking about buying a radio. Go ahead and scroll over to page 4 next. Okay, on page 4, they have a little, there's a little chart here. Kind of gives you an idea of audio quality, analog versus digital. You know, as you get away from the radio that you're talking to, whether it's a repeater or somebody else on simplex, on analog, you tend to slowly pick up noise, and you know the noise gets higher, and the audio in there gets lower. DMR works a little differently because it's digital. There's no noise, and so it stays more clear, in that you don't have to pick that voice out of the audio. It's just basically the quality of the audio becomes lower and lower until it turns into just garbled audio and you can't understand it. But for someone like me, that's actually easier, because my brain in particular, I have a tough time picking out audio out of noise. But if it's just very poor quality audio with no noise, sometimes I have a better chance of understanding it. So it's interesting to see the difference. And let's see, go to page 5 next. With DMR, you're introduced to the concept of time slots, and DMR uses what's known as TDMA, time division multiple access, where it divides the bandwidth of your channel in half, and so you can actually have two conversations going on at the same time on the same channel, and DMR processes them in 30 millisecond slices. And so it's interesting, you know, because you can have the two conversations going on. It takes up half the bandwidth. This is KC3GMM. Moving to page 7 is a illustration, just to further show you time slots. It basically they use the analogy of a duplex. You can have two separate families living in the same structure, and then within the time slots you have what they refer to in DMR as talk groups. And so talk groups would be like the rooms in the house. And if you're used to regular analog radio, you can think of them as working like CL tones or CCSS tones, where you can have a conversation between a group of people on that particular you call it like almost like a sub channel, and so simultaneous conversations can't take place at the same time, but you can divide it up as if you were using cell tones. And talk groups they're not, while they're not the same thing, it's you can think of it as a similar concept. And go to page 8 next. So a little more on talk groups. When you get into repeater use, you'll find that there are a lot of predefined talk groups, and you'll have them for like to divide up by. You'll have like a PA talk group. So PA talk group could cover all the repeaters in the state of Pennsylvania. There's a Western Pennsylvania talk group. So it'd be all the repeaters in Western Pennsylvania. And then you can even have local talk groups that's just that particular repeater. And I think elsewhere in this document there's lists of talk groups. And when you program up your radio on the Micmore site, there's actually a spreadsheet that contains all of the talk groups that the repeater system carries. I'll turn it over to Tony now. If you want to pick up, go ahead. KB3BY from KC3GMS.
All right, very good, Nathan. Yeah, this is KB3BY, and if everyone to go to page 9, I'll stand by a second. Continue on with talk groups. So each repeater that is a DMR repeater, that repeater owner is going to determine what talk groups they carry. So typically in this part of the state, you would probably carry a Pennsylvania talk group, and also the Western Pennsylvania talk group, and maybe some adjacent states like Maryland statewide or Northeast Region 1. Additionally, there are some other talk programs in computer radio, like so very similar to say on Simplex 146.52 is the nationwide Simplex calling frequency on 2 meters. You wouldn't want to continue with QSO on the PA statewide channel for a very long time. So you would probably want to say, hey, if we're going to continue the QSO for a little bit, let's go switch over to TAC 310 or TAC 311. And so you would switch the channel over there and you would pick up the conversation there. So it kind of depends on who owns the repeater and basically what talk groups they have programmed. And usually they have a list of either on like the club's website or on Repeater Finder. There's a list of talk groups that's supported by that repeater. And if everyone would like to switch to go over to page 10, I'll stand by every second while people get there. So, additionally, there might be some full-time talk groups that's programmed into the repeater, like they would always carry the PA statewide on time slot 1, or on time slot 2, they may have all the TAC groups programmed in. So again, it's going to depend on the repeater owner. And if everyone would like to go over to page 11. Alright, so again with the individual repeaters and how they're programmed, so time slot 1 may include PA TAC, PA statewide, Maryland statewide, and time slot 2 can have like a local channel, and additional TAC channels, and maybe some additional states, or however the repeater owner wants to program it. Additionally, depending on how you have it programmed in, there's talk groups for every country, regions in every country, different hobbies, Boy Scouts, and so forth, and like emergency communications. And if everyone would like to move to page 12, cost can be a little expensive, or if you build your own with what they call an NWTDM board, it can be a little less money, but it does take a little bit of know-how, I guess. All right, and with that, I'm going to switch back to Nathan. KT3 DMM, and this is KT3 CYA.
Thank you, Tony. Here's KC3 GMM. So I'll pick it up on page 13 here. I'll drop and give everyone a moment to jump to page 13. Okay, so yeah, you typically have two kinds of repeaters. You have repeaters that are standalone local repeaters, just like a lot of FM repeaters. And you can talk to other people on that repeater. There was one like that for a while. I don't think it's up anymore, but Uniontown had one. It was a standalone DMR repeater, and I talked to some people on it. Sometimes there was a little bit of activity on it, and I think now it's just FM. But so yeah, that was an example of a standalone repeater, and then the vast majority of them are linked mostly via the internet. And so, you'll have a big network of repeaters, usually in multiple states, all connected together via the internet. And the thing about that is, because you're going out over the internet, there's a little bit of latency whenever you're talking, and so it's recommended that you, when you key up the repeater, you wait a few moments before you talk. This thing says 2. I think it's actually about 5 seconds that you want to wait before you key up, and that allows the radio to get connected and talk to the repeater, and get out to the internet. Otherwise, it'll chop off the beginning of your conversation, even worse than it would talking right away when you key up on FM. Okay, on to page 14. Okay, so yeah, analog versus digital, keying up. Analog, with analog radio, you can key up while someone's talking and walk right over them. With digital, you can actually configure your radio so that it'll actually give you an error if you try and key up while the repeater's in use. And also, because you have multiple talk groups on each time slot, you could actually have somebody talking on another talk group, a different talk group that you're not listening to at the moment. Your radio is not tuned in on that talk group, so that's handy because you'll get, when you go to key up, you'll get that alert, and it'll prevent you from keying up and interfering with the conversation. A lot of radios also will light up. There's like an activity light that lights up, so you know ahead of time before you even try and key up. Okay, and then page 16. We're going to go to page 16 next. So I mentioned before there, most DMR repeaters are on a network, and there's two major networks. There's the DMR Mark network and Brandmeister network, and there are repeaters in Pennsylvania that are on both, or on each, I should say, and there are actually links between the two networks. They actually share some talk groups in common, and so sometimes some of the talk groups that you talk on one network are actually linked over to the other network, so you can get out to both networks on certain talk groups. Next is page 17. you have talk groups that are shared between the two major networks, and this slide lists some of the most common ones. Your state groups are shared, and then some of the TAC groups. We mentioned, Tony and I both mentioned TAC groups, but didn't mention. So they're actually used for the example Tony gave for carrying on a conversation on that you were having on a larger talk group that kind of will free that talk group up to allow other people to get on. And also what that does for you if you switch over to a TAC channel is a lot of the repeaters don't carry all the TAC channels full time, and so you can bring up that TAC channel on your repeater that you're connected to, and the person you're talking to could bring up that TAC channel on their repeater, and so you won't tie up all the repeaters on the network as if you were talking on a state group. You tie up that time slot on all the repeaters because all the repeaters are carrying that full time. If you switch to a TAC group that they only carry at push to talk on demand, then only the repeaters that are in use are tied up with that time slot. And then on page 18 here, I'll turn it back over to Tony for repeaters versus hotspots. This is KC3GMM.
Hi, thank you, Nathan. This is KB3BYA. And in addition to your HT or mobile DMR radio, there are two main pieces of equipment used to access the DMR network. One is a repeater, which we've been talking about, and the other one is a hotspot. And a hotspot is basically a little server, a little simplex repeater that's usually built off a Raspberry Pi, and it's linked to the internet. So you could program your hotspot to run an operating system, and I use Pi-Star. And with that operating system, I have a program to a certain simplex frequency that's designated as a digital simplex frequency. They're very low power, so with that hotspot, and you can access any of the, Brandmeister or DMR MARC networks right from the hotspot, and you don't need to be within radio range of a repeater. With that, we'll go to page 19. So yeah, the different channels are going to have different activity levels, and that's going to also determine whether on a repeater if they're going to be a full-time channel or a part-time channel. So with that, we'll go to page 20. Like we were saying before, there's a statewide a nationwide talk group 3100, and that's basically just a nationwide calling channel. So you could listen to that one, call someone, and once you make contact, say, hey, switch over to talk group 310 or 311 or one of the other TAC channels to continue the QSO. And now we're on page 21. Alright, and a couple operating, principles on repeaters. Wait a few seconds before you hit the PTT to allow anyone else to jump in, and pause 1 second after PTT. And usually you have a busy channel light on your radio to signal if the radio is in use, so if you see activity, don't key up. And also announce your presence, just like on a repeater. Although one of the ways to activate a talk group on a repeater and on a hotspot is chunking it. Now, chunking a repeater, regular repeater, is probably not such a good idea without identifying. That is actually how you switch channels on a hotspot or even on a repeater. But if you're chunking a repeater, go ahead and identify. Let's go to page 22. Let's go to page 23. Alright. So to see the different activities on the talk groups, you can actually go to some of the, either on the Grandmeister network, there's an activity monitor that shows you who's talking on what channels and the activity there. So if you see a whole bunch of people talking on one channel, you can actually switch to that and get on the conversation maybe. And I guess there's some other websites here as well to check out the activity of the talk groups. Alright, with that, I think we're going to be over to page 26, and I'm going to send it right back over to Nathan, KC3GMM, to talk about code plugs.
So yeah, code plug, this is KC3GMM. Code plug is basically, you'll hear code plug talked about a lot with DMR. It's basically how you program your radio, and you can actually find code plugs for specific radios a lot of times that are already pre-programmed. But basically it consists of, you have a contact list which contains all of your talk groups, and you'll assign those to the channels as you build them. The channel information itself, which is for the repeater or hotspot that you're connecting to, you have to have a channel for each talk group. So, you may be only setting up a code plug to connect to one repeater, but you'll build a channel for every single talk group that you think you're going to use on that repeater. And then you have zones, which are logical groupings of channels. So for example, for the 7 Springs repeater, I have a zone that contains all of the talk groups that it carries, and then I have a separate zone for the talk groups that I use most commonly, and that makes it a little simpler whenever you're scrolling through it. And so yeah, you can build your own, or you can download one from the internet that's already built for your radio. And next we'll go to page 27. So on page 27 we have a little more detail. You'll build your contact list whenever you build your code plug, or you'll download a code plug that will already have it in there. And also from off the top of my head, I can't think of the website. It's the website that you use to register for a DMR ID, which we didn't cover yet. We'll cover that in more detail whenever we talk about actually programming your radio. But basically, when you register, or whenever you program your radio to connect to one of the DMR networks, you have to register for an ID number that identifies your radio. That site that has that ID number has contact lists that you can download in the form of a spreadsheet that you can import to most code plug programs to dump all this information into your radio for easier programming. Basically what you have here is you have a talk group name and a talk group number, and then you can also program the IDs of people that you talk to regularly on DMR into your contact list as well. And on most radios, whenever they call, they're talking on a repeater, or you're talking to them, you'll actually see their name on your screen. And then there's other features that you can use outside of the repeater. If you're just on simplex, you can send messages back and forth and things like that, or you can call them directly. But those things are not recommended for repeater use, because they, like for example, if you were to call somebody directly, you tie up that time slot on the entire network with your conversation. But anyway, you can add those folks into your contact list along with these talk groups. Okay, let's see, page 28 next. Okay, this is KC3GMM. 28 just has a more detailed view of the screenshot in the previous slide. And yeah, basically you see the names of the talk groups, and then that call ID column is the talk group number. And so when you're programming your radio, like I said before, for each channel you'll select it by name. So it does help to name these as descriptive as you can in the limited amount of space that you'll get for your for the descriptive names of the contacts in your radio. Next we'll do page 29. So on page 29, here's what you'll program into your radio when you build a channel for a repeater. So if your radio does analog and digital, obviously the mode you'll select will be digital. The frequency, and unlike an FM repeater, the DMR repeaters, there's no PL tone to put in there, so you just put the transmit and receive frequency on there. Then you have your we didn't mention this, but there's also color code, and it's another way to divide up channels. It's typically almost always one. Same with the bandwidth, 12.5 kilohertz, and then your time slot. And whenever you're looking at whether it's repeater book or some spreadsheet that you're looking at that has all the talk groups, it should tell you what time slot it's on, so you'll have to choose the time slot. Very important, the talk group that it transmits on, and they show receive talk group. I don't think my radio had that, but if your radio does have that, they tell you to select none, and it'll default to your transmit contact or talk group number. And then high or low for power, just like if you're doing a FM channel. And then transmit criteria. This is where you specify whether or not you can key up whenever the time slot is in use. And so usually what you want to select is, I believe, channel free. I can't remember if channel free or color code. When we talk about programming, I'll be sure to specify for that. But basically what you want to do is prevent your radio from being able to step on another conversation. And then finally, your scan list. Most radios will allow you to add channels to scan lists, and so you'll pick what scan list or lists you would like that channel to be a member of whenever you're setting it up. Okay, moving on to page 30. Okay, KC3GMM for ID here. So as I mentioned before, when you're building your channels, you have to build a channel for every talk group. Not all repeaters carry all the talk groups. For our local network, that miclor.com site actually has a spreadsheet of all the repeaters on the network and all of the talk groups that they carry, and it also specifies whether they carry them full-time, push-to-talk, so on and so forth. So that's helpful when you're programming your radio. The third bullet point: start small. Just to get your feet wet. Put a couple channels in there. Put ones in there that are going going to have a lot of activity, and then as you use it, you'll find what you need, or you'll find that you know what you need more, and you can add more channels as you go. And then finally, for code plugs, what they say, there's no master code plug out there. Folks have samples all over the place. When I did mine, I didn't use a sample. I started programming it and put it in there. But yeah, you can look at a sample one to get an idea of what you need to do to build it. It's not that tough. The best thing you can do is just get started. Just dive in head first and go at it. Okay, on to page 31. So what we have on here at page 31 is what it looks like in the software whenever you program it up. And this software is actually the CPS software that I use to program my TYT DMR radio. So this is very familiar to me. But yeah, these settings are all the settings that we talked about a couple slides ago. And then a couple other ones are self-explanatory, like you can set the squelch for each one, there's a timeout timer, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's just another view of what we already talked about. Okay, page 32, zones. So as I mentioned before, zones are ways to group your channels together in some logical order that makes sense to you. There's no right or wrong way to do this. As I mentioned, I have two zones for the 7 Springs repeater. One with all the talk groups that it carries, and one with about 8 of them that I commonly use. So yeah, you can do whatever you want with the zones. And the next page 33 is it's just another screenshot of what the zone list looks like in the software. And Tony, I'll turn it back over to you, KB3BY from KC3GMM, if you want to pick it up, page 34, scan list.
Hey, very good. Thank you, Nathan. This is KB3BY, and the scan list is just that, just like on a police scanner that has different banks. You're kind of programming different banks that you want to scan. So, and by the way, most actually all that I know of DMR radios can actually work on analog as well. So you can have different zones programmed for analog repeaters, analog scanning, and you can also scan the DMR channels on, say your repeater as well. And page 35 just illustrates that a little better with programming the scan list. And then if we go to page 36, pretty much the summary. Hope that this little presentation helped everyone out, and Nathan did a fantastic job. And at this point, we're going to ask for any questions. Anyone out there with any questions, please call Net Control.
Net Control, this is K3SGT. Do you copy?
Good evening, Eric. K3SGT. Go ahead.
Hi. I was interested in the hotspots, understanding the hotspots that you talked about. Are these Wi-Fi hotspots, or is this operating on a ham band, a VHF ham band, allowing you to use your HT to get in through the internet to the larger network?
Oh, yeah, so I can answer that. So there are different kinds, but basically it's sort of like a simplex repeater, and it does have RF that you basically transmit to and from your HT or your mobile radio with. They're usually UHF, and the hotspot itself is usually a Raspberry Pi or some such could be connected either via Wi-Fi or with an Ethernet cable, depending on the type of hotspot you build or buy. Does that answer your question, Eric?
It does, and you said UHF, so is this typically, what sort of range might you expect from the hotspots that are in use?
So typically hotspots transmit somewhere between 10 and 20 milliwatts. So I would imagine maybe 100 yards or so, a few hundred yards of range with supplied, or I actually upgraded my little teeny weeny rubber ducky antenna to a little bigger rubber ducky antenna. So with the hotspot, mine transmits at 10 milliwatts, and my HT transmits at 200 milliwatts. And I have pretty good coverage throughout my house and throughout my yard. Back to you, Eric.
Oh, that makes it very clear, and I better understand the functionality of the hotspot. Thanks a lot from K3SGT.
Very good, thank you, Eric. Any additional questions for the net? Please call KB3 B-Way. K7FD. Hi, Glenn.
First, let me just say thank you very much. Very good information, and I think the more often we hear some information on DMR, the things will pick up. I remember sitting in on a presentation at the last time we had Dayton on site, and I remember hearing a lot of this stuff. But I'm one of those people who moves really slow in geologic time. So the more I hear it, I think the more sense it makes. But I think ultimately, and perhaps at field day, we should have a little sit down with programming a DMR HT or something, which and if I get to listen to a DMR conversation, some of this will help fall in place. It's just a little bit too much information at once for me, but that's just the way I am. But thanks again, both of you, for an excellent presentation and for the slides. KE7FD.
Yeah, all right, very good, Glenn. Thank you. And I don't want to minimize it, but it's not as complex maybe as it kind of seems. Once you start it, you pretty much get the hang of it. And I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but my radio holds 4,000 channels, and I think 200,000 contacts. So, but let's go back and see if there's any additional questions for the Tech Talk Thursday. This is KB3BY. Any questions?
KB3BYA NU3Q with a question.
Go ahead, Bob.
Going back to networks, you mentioned two networks. There's also another network out there called TGIF. Where does that fit into the overall scheme of things?
I'm going to turn that over to Nathan. Now, I don't know, Nathan. Do you ever hear that one?
This is KC3GMM. No, I apologize. I have not. I have spent most of my time on the DMR Mark network just because the Seven Springs repeater happens to be connected to that network. And then I know about Brandmeister because it is interconnected so tightly with DMR Mark. And also I believe Brandmeister was the original one. So TGIF may be newer, and so it could be. I haven't researched DMR much since I programmed the radio and began talking on it. Now I just kind of use it. So yeah, it could be that it's a newer network. I apologize, but I don't know anything about it. But I have looked it up, and so yeah, I'll probably be reading about it tonight. So thank you, Bob, for the tip on that. KC3GM.
This is KB3BY. Yeah, thanks, Bob. I just looked that up. You can find them at tgif.network, and they are apparently a new network that's up and running. I don't want to get into anything any more, basically any more complicated than what we were supposed to be doing. Is the basic training on DMR, but they do have bridges between other digital radio types, like Next Generation and Yaesu System Fusion. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'll have to look that up and see how we can connect to that. It looks, their webpage looks a lot like the Brandmeister webpage. So, they have the active talkers and the last heard and so on and so forth. So, thanks, Bob. Back to you. Any additional NU3Q?
Yeah, Tony, I'm just curious, where can you find the latest and greatest updates for Pi-Star-based hotspots?
Alright, so the Pi-Star is going to be located at pistar.uk, and I seriously have not looked at that website since I downloaded my OS for my Raspberry Pi. So I know I initially had, oh look, apparently version 4 has just been released. So if you do have a Raspberry Pi and you're running Pi-Star, apparently you can upgrade to version 4. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tony, because I run a Pi-Star hotspot in my DMR. And the hotspot I have is made by the gentleman that started the TGIF network. His name is Robert Pressman. It's KG4, I forget his exact call. He's down in Florida.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very familiar with that one. So when I was getting into the hotspots, it took me about 3 months to get mine all set up. Basically because I was using a Pi-Star 3 Plus, and I was downloading the wrong operating system. There was actually a special operating system, Pi-Star operating system, just for that version. So that's why I got bound up so much. But yeah, good stuff. Any additional questions for the Tech Talk Thursday? Please call KB3BY.
A question from K3SGT.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, this is pretty basic for those of us who have not done it, but if one wants to dive into this, excuse me, you're then accessing the Seven Springs repeater, or you name the other one, wherever that was, and if one has access to those repeaters, you can get in. Otherwise, a hotspot is the route to go. Is that how you do it?
That is absolutely correct. Additionally, you can do simplex, yeah, so, and you'll be surprised, the Seven Springs repeater is very accessible. I can get it here with only 5 watts and a rooftop antenna. I know people from Carnegie have been getting into it. So, and I know Nathan got into it as well, so we talked on that repeater as well. So I think that right now there's somebody that was going to put up a repeater, a DMR repeater in West Mifflin. I don't know how that's turning out, but right now I think Seven Springs is it. Is that good, Eric? K3SGT, KB3BY.
That is good. It sounds like those of us reasonably close to the city could dive in by accessing the repeaters that are already out there directly.
KC3GMM.
Good, Nathan.
Just a note about the Seven Springs repeater when you're buying equipment, because some DMR radios out there are just single band. So the Seven Springs repeater is VHF. So don't buy a UHF only radio, because you may find there actually is. I guess I'll mention this too in talking about repeaters.
in the area. There is a repeater in Greensburg that's UHF, that's on the DMR network. That one is on the Brandmeister network, but doesn't have very good coverage. It's low power and not in a great spot, so I was unable to get into it even from a nice high hilltop out here in Washington County. Seven Springs does have good coverage. You can get it pretty much anywhere in Washington County, and then as you get closer to Pittsburgh, you gotta kind of hilltop it. But I can hit it from my front porch with a rubber duck. So yeah, great coverage in Washington County, and like I said, as you get closer to Pittsburgh, it kind of tapers off. If you're on 79, you lose it just north of the 50-mile marker where all that construction is going on. Once you plunge down that hill, it's spotty after that. But I've gotten into it from hilltops up in Cranberry. So yeah, not bad coverage given how far away it is. Back to net control, KC3GMM.
All right, thank you, Nathan. All right, any additional questions or comments for the Thursday Tech Talk about DMR? Please call KB3BWay.
K7FD, when you're ready for a final comment.
Keep that in mind, Glenn. Any additional comments or questions? Please call KB3BWay.
KB3BY, KB3ERQ.
KB3ERQ, correct?
Correct. Hey, question about DMR. How dependent is it on the internet? I know that you can do simplex radio to radio, but as far as repeater to repeater, can you use all ham radio backbone, or is it dependent on the internet?
That is a fantastic question. So, like other linked repeaters, a lot of repeaters, if the internet goes down for that repeater, you could probably, most likely, depending on how that individual repeater is programmed, you can most likely use it as just a local repeater. And then, yeah, hotspots are pretty much, they are completely dependent on the internet. But repeaters, if the internet goes down, you can still access local functions. And additionally, most, actually, as far as I know, all DMR radios can actually do analog as well. So if the internet is down, you can access an analog repeater in the same area. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, mostly, but also curious about repeater to repeater. Like, is there a way with DMR, since it is, I'm assuming, just TCP/IP to connect repeater to repeater without the, the broad public internet?
Right, so linking is typically done via the internet. Otherwise, it would be done the same way as analog repeaters are linked together via RF links. But yeah, it absolutely is dependent on who built the repeater and how they programmed it. So most likely, for a DMR repeater anyhow, they are probably going to be using the internet for repeater linking. So if the internet is down in the area, you're probably only talking local. Back to you, KB3ERQ.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the answers.
Okay, you're welcome. Any additional comments or questions for the net, please call KB3BWay.
KB3BY.
Good, Nathan.
Yeah, I'll just expand on that quickly, based on what I know about the DMR Mark network, in particular the portion of it that serves the repeaters in our area, including the Seven Springs repeater, and most of the other ones in Pennsylvania and Maryland. So those repeaters are all controlled by a piece of equipment that's known as a C bridge, and C is in Charlie, and so they all connect to that via the internet. And there are for Pennsylvania and Maryland, that's known as the K4 USD network. There are 2 C
bridges, and the repeaters are divided up between those two C bridges. They're not redundant, but the entire thing is it's all connected via the internet. And so if one of those C bridges were to lose connectivity to the internet, basically the whole thing goes down. Or if an individual repeater loses connectivity to the internet, as Tony said, that one just kind of would operate as a standalone repeater. And if you and someone else were on the same talk group and time slot, you could continue to use that repeater, but it would be local, obviously, because of no internet. But yeah, from what I understand, at least the repeaters that I know of, they're all linked to the internet because everything is controlled and coordinated by that C bridge. Back to net control, KC3GM.
All right, thanks for that, Nathan, for expanding on that. Any additional comments or questions for that, please call KB3BYA.
KB3BYA and U3Q with another comment or two.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Tony, first off, going back to the Seven Springs repeater, where I'm out here in Collier Township, we have pretty good coverage. For those of you who know Jim, KA3KSP, he lives a couple miles away from me down in the Roslyn Heights section of Carnegie. He's up pretty high, and he can hit the Seven Springs from his front porch with an HT. So that has pretty good coverage from that area, that perspective as well. And once again, I will remind everybody, this is being live streamed right now on my YouTube channel, NU3Q Amateur Radio. It will take about 12 hours for it to upload to my channel. Once it does, I'll send the link up by the email reflector.
Awesome, thanks again, Bob. Any additional comments or questions for the net, please call KB3BYA.
KB3BYA, KB3 York.
Go ahead.
Okay, so clarifying question. You can feel free to smack me at some point. But if you wanted to link repeaters, could you use something like Arden, the amateur radio, what's the emergency radio network, or essentially Wi-Fi over ham radio frequencies? And if that's even possible, is anyone doing that?
That's a fantastic question, and I absolutely do not have an answer. Does anyone out there have an answer?
KB3CMT.
Hi, Curtis, go ahead.
Tony, KB3BYA. Good talk this evening. I can answer a couple of questions about Amper or AmperNet. AmperNet, I believe, can be used and is used in some cases for some backhaul linking on some of the repeaters. Although one of the bigger issues, with AmperNet is just getting it set up and getting your backhaul out there to the repeater site itself. Although if you want to use an AX25 connection or TCP/IP over radio to make your link, you could do that with AmperNet. Just a setup on the front end. I was running AmperNet here in Pittsburgh when I first became licensed myself, and it's a little bit of a struggle. Although it is free, so if you have an interest in TCP/IP and back-end routing, it's ampr.net. It's the 666 network. No, 999 network. I have to go back and look. But go take a look.
Awesome, thanks for that, Curtis. Answer your questions, I guess, Ben?
It does, thanks. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you letting me kind of think out loud on this topic that I'm not very knowledgeable about. Thanks again, KB3, URQ.
You're quite welcome. Any additional comments or questions for that, please call KB3BYA.
B3CMT.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Apologize there, it just re-hit me. Brain's not working as well as it used to. It's the 4.4 network, the 44 network.
and I believe it's a .org, not a .net. I apologize. And to follow up, one of the struggles with AmperNet, at least from my view in trying to make it work with newer technology blended with the internet is, there could be no encryption, etc. on the Amper side. KB3CMT.
Thanks again, Curtis. All right, any additional comments or questions for that, please call KB3 B-Way. All right, sounds like we're going over to you, Glenn, K7FD.
All right, this is K7FD. I realized that, we first started talking about Tech Talk several weeks ago, and I am not the moderator for this. This is self-running, and as you saw tonight, everyone, both Tony and Nathan ran the show. They conducted the initial part, and we ran a little bit over because it was an interesting topic, and it was our first time at this. We consider Jim's Tech Talk unofficial, but that really was the first one we had several weeks ago, many weeks ago. We'd like to encourage anyone who is interested in either hearing about something to send it out to the Reflector, or if you are interested in presenting something on the April Tech Talk or thereafter, please don't hesitate to bounce it off, and we'd love to get it scheduled. And again, it can be 5 minutes long, it can be or longer. So I'd like to thank Tony and Nathan for their hard work, and Curtis for posting it up on the website. Back to Net Control, KE7FD.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, and thanks. It did really turn out well, I think. So, well, hearing no further comments or questions, I will now close the net. I'd like to thank Nathan, KC3GMN, for a great presentation, Bob, NU3Q, for live streaming on his YouTube channel, Curtis for posting on the website, and John Mickler and K7NXU for creating this PDF. Tonight's net was made possible by the Wireless Association of South Hills and Frank, N3FB, for linking his repeater to ours, allowing expanded coverage for our weekly nets and our everyday communications. And by amateurs like you. And for the Wireless Association of South Hills, this is KB3 B-Way saying 73 and returning the repeaters back to general amateur use. Any stations wishing to use these repeaters now are invited to use them freely. The net is closed. Have a good evening. 73 everyone, KB3 B-Way.
Thank you, Bob. Again, thank you, Bob, for putting this up on the world. KE7FD.
KE7FD and U3Q. You're welcome, Glenn. Like I said, this is a new thing for me too, just like this Tech Talk net. This live streaming thing's a new thing for me too, so I'm still learning. So I'm bound to make a little blips here and there, so if I do, forgive me.
KB3 and the group from K3SGT. Good, Eric. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys profoundly for this talk, and although Glenn expressed some concern, he and I are probably, I guess, in the same place. We have not dived into this in the past and are getting our first taste from what you presented. I did not concern myself with any dense material that was in there, because you can see that this is the sort of thing where you need to get the overall picture of what this is for, what it's about, and how it works. And then the details of how to do things like programming or understanding the different groups or how you get to them are things one learns very quickly when you dive in and actually try it. So I wanted to compliment you both, or all of you, I guess at least three of you, involved in putting this together. It really worked well, and thank you for this effort and for the sharing. I appreciated it. From K3SGT.
You're quite welcome, Eric. And I tell you what, the first mistake I made was I bought my DMR radio first, and I tried to connect just was not getting in, and that was, I think it might have been before Seven Springs, I'm not sure. But then that got me into the hotspot, and I guess the rest is history. But thanks again, and this is KB3 BYA.
Hey, KC3 GMM. You can jump in if nobody's transmitting here. Yeah, if anybody's still listening, feel free to reach out. I'm kind of speaking for Tony, but yeah, reach out to either one of us. If you're setting up and struggling, shoot us an email. Get on the Club Reflector, shoot out an email, and we're happy to help. But yeah, don't be intimidated. There's a lot of material here tonight, but this stuff's simple. If I could do it, then then any of you guys can do it. Piece of cake. When I got into it, I won a handheld DMR radio at the Breeze Shooters Hamfest a couple years ago, and so I didn't even know DMR existed. And took it home, found out there was a repeater, found out what DMR was, and I was able to program it up with very little research on my part, which is my usual mode of operation whenever I'm going into something. So yeah, don't be intimidated by it. Just jump in and tinker around with it. It's actually pretty simple. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening tonight, and thanks Tony and everybody else from the club and Bob that helped out. KC3 GMM.
KB3 ERQ. Good, Ben. Hey, question, I didn't really hear this. I don't know if it was talked about, but I know someone had talked about, several people talked about these Seven Springs repeater and how good the coverage is. But is there any other DMR repeaters in our area besides that one?
KC3 GMM. So there is a DMR repeater in Greensburg, and there was one in New Kensington. It was up for a very short time, and there was a frequency coordination issue that came up, and the guy had to take it down. But this was probably 2 years ago. He was working with the repeater council to get a frequency pair, and I don't know whatever became of that. I don't know if he scrapped it or what. And then Tony mentioned one. I forget what county. Tony, I'll turn it over to you for that in a second here. But yeah, as you head east towards Harrisburg, there are more and more repeaters, but in this area they're very sparse. And also Tony was looking into building one himself. I'll let him tell you a little more about that. Go ahead, KB3BY from KC3 GMM.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, no, there was one briefly in West Mifflin, and the person, I forget the call sign, is still tinkering with it. But yeah, I'm looking to build one, but I'm still just in the planning phase and trying to get some information together and seeing kind of what I need and what I want to use for it. But so that's all I have. Back to you, Ben. KB3 ERQ.
Oh, thanks. I was just poking around on Repeater Book on my phone as we were talking, which is what brought up the question. Didn't see anything within 50 miles, but maybe some of those things just aren't updated. So yeah, it's good to know there's at least a couple pretty close.
Here's KC3 GMM. There is also one, I should say was one in Uniontown. And it was a mixed mode repeater in that you could do analog on it, and it also did DMR. Now granted, it wasn't networked, but it did DMR just locally, and although it couldn't do FM and DMR together, it didn't I plan on reaching out to somebody in the club to find out whatever became of that. Because I had talked to a couple people on it on different occasions, and used to monitor it with some regularity. But yeah, that's another one that was in the area at one time. Was Uniontown. Now, also, if, like I said before, DMR is more popular out east, particularly by Harrisburg. So if you're ever taking a trip out the Turnpike and you have DMR capability, then program your radio ahead of time with find the repeaters along the Turnpike and get those programmed in. And like I said, once you start heading east, there's a lot of DMR coverage along Route 76, KC3GMM.
Yeah, and over by Chambersburg as well, I believe there's some DMR repeaters. And I believe the new Alinco radios has a feature called DMR roaming. So after you program off your radio, it's going to use the GPS in the radio to kind of figure out where you're at, and it automatically switches to the next repeater. That's what I hear. So it sounds kind of awesome. I'm waiting for the mobile to come out. It's the MD500. So I'm going to sign with everyone. Had a fantastic time tonight. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nathan. And 73 at all. This is KB3 BY.
Okay. Thanks. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, this is great. Learned a lot. Got my wheels spinning, or whatever you want to say, to think about DMR, especially with the prices coming down. So, awesome. Thanks, guys, for putting this on. I'm going to sign here and go and study like I should. But I'll talk to you later. KB3, your cue.
KC3GMM. Yeah, I'm going to be clear as well. I have to run upstairs. I will also mention, if you head up north, there is one, what the heck is the name of the area? There's a park up there. Warren, Pennsylvania. There's one in Warren, Pennsylvania. So, yeah, that's it. KC3GMM. I'm going to be clear.